Chapter 1. The Hunter and the Uncatchable Prey. The jungle world of Dras 4 was a planet of predators. Everything that moved through its dense, violet-hued forests was either hunting or being hunted. The thick canopy overhead allowed only slivers of golden sunlight to pierce through, creating an eerie twilight that stretched across the endless wilderness. The air was alive with the distant cries of territorial beasts, the rustling of unseen creatures, and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot, warning that something deadly was near. But none of the predators on Dras 4 were as feared as Velka Xyn. Velka was a Terrakian huntress, one of the best her people had ever produced. The Terrakians were a warrior race, known across the galaxy for their inhuman speed, heightened reflexes, and an uncanny ability to track and capture their prey. They had ruled the untamed worlds for centuries, their hunting traditions woven deep into the fabric of their culture. Velka was one of the elite. She was a shadow in the trees, a whisper in the undergrowth, a trap waiting to be sprung. And her traps always worked. Until she met him. The elusive prey. Velka crouched in the low-hanging branches of a gnarled Zareth tree, her keen amber eyes scanning the jungle floor below. The darkness of the dense foliage provided her with excellent cover, her form blending seamlessly with the thick, interwoven vines that clung to the towering trunks. She adjusted the settings on her energy bow, the curved weapon humming softly as it prepared for release. Her target had no idea he was being watched. At least, he shouldn't have. She had studied his movements for the past 3 days, tracking him through rugged terrain, marshlands, and treacherous ravines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Unlike most sentients, he hadn't left a visible trail, no broken twigs, no footprints in the mud. It was as if he had erased his presence from the jungle itself, moving like a ghost. That only made him more intriguing. Ethan Voss. A human. A scavenger, smuggler, survivalist, whatever label fit best. His kind weren't built for places like this. Humans were fragile in comparison to most species in the galaxy, weaker, slower, lacking natural armor or venom. And yet, against all odds, this particular one had managed to evade her for 3 full days. And that was impossible. Velka had bested Galvarian warlords, Zalari assassins, and feral Thoraxi beasts 3 times her size. She had taken down Republic soldiers and pirate lords, her traps capturing their prey with flawless precision. But this human? This damn human had somehow seen through every ambush, every tripwire, every concealed snare she had left for him. It was beginning to irritate her. Velka watched him now from her hidden perch, her body still as stone. He was resting near a large rock formation, crouched beside a small pool of collected rainwater, splashing it onto his face. His dark brown hair was damp, strands clinging to his forehead, and his clothes were tattered from the relentless jungle. Despite this, he didn't look exhausted, only focused. She admired that. It was rare for prey to show such control, but admiration didn't change the hunt. She slowly exhaled, steadying her grip on the bowstring, preparing to release a stun shot that would drop him instantly. It would be over in seconds. And then, his head snapped up. Velka's eyes widened. He shouldn't have noticed her. No one noticed her. But Ethan Voss did. And then he ran. The chase through the wilds. Velka swore under her breath and launched herself from the tree. She hit the ground in a seamless roll, already sprinting before the dust had settled. Ethan was fast, but she was faster. She moved with lethal precision, weaving through the dense jungle as she pursued him. Her enhanced vision tracked his movement through the undergrowth, watching the way he zigzagged unpredictably, never moving in a straight line, never making it easy to predict his path. Smart, but not smart enough. Velka leapt onto a fallen Zareth log, flipping forward and landing just ahead of him. She raised her energy bow. Ethan dropped into a slide, skidding beneath her before she could fire. Velka barely had time to react before he grabbed a handful of dirt and flung it into her eyes. Her vision blurred. She growled, leaping back, rubbing at her face as she recalibrated her senses. By the time she cleared her vision, he was gone. Velka let out a long breath, her irritation growing. He had outmaneuvered her again. She had never failed to capture a target before. Never. And yet, this human had managed to evade her repeatedly, slipping through her grasp like smoke through her fingers. She could feel the frustration tightening her jaw. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She would hunt him down. She would win. Because she always did. The unexpected turn. The sun had set by the time Velka found his trail again. She moved carefully now, slower than before. She had underestimated him once, but she wouldn't make the same mistake again. The jungle at night was even more dangerous. Real predators came out. She tracked him for another hour, following the faintest signs of movement, the subtle impressions of his passing that most beings would never notice. Then, she heard it. A struggle. Velka tensed, instinct taking over as she scaled a nearby rock formation, gaining a higher vantage point. She peered down, eyes scanning the darkness below. Ethan was there, but he wasn't alone. A Draskan mauler had found him, a towering reptilian beast, all razor-sharp talons and muscle, its fanged maw wide as it lunged. Ethan dodged, rolling beneath the creature's clawed swipe, his movements precise but too slow. Velka had seen hundreds of hunters fight these things before. She knew how it would end. The mauler would win. Unless. Velka didn't think. She moved. With a single bound, she leapt from the rock formation, drawing her energy blade in midair. She landed hard, slamming the weapon into the mauler's spine, sending a surge of energy straight into its nervous system. The creature screeched, writhing in pain before collapsing. The jungle went silent. Velka stepped back, breathing heavy. Ethan was watching her. She turned to face him, their eyes locking. For the first time, there was no chase, no struggle. Only the quiet understanding of two hunters who had just fought the same battle. Velka slowly exhaled. "Seems you're not the only one who can get caught," she murmured. Ethan smirked. And for the first time, she wasn't sure who the real hunter was anymore. Chapter 2. An Uneasy Alliance. The Draskan mauler's body lay still on the jungle floor, steam rising from the deep wound in its spine where Velka's energy blade had struck. The thick, humid air of Drasfor was still now, the jungle eerily silent after the death of such a dominant predator. Velka exhaled slowly, standing tall over the creature, her grip still tight on her blade. The thrill of the kill was something her kind lived for. Durakians were hunters by birth, their culture built around the art of tracking, trapping, and eliminating their targets. And yet, in this moment, her focus wasn't on the beast she had slain. It was on the human. Ethan Voss stood a few paces away, breathing heavily, his body tense but relaxed enough to show he was no stranger to danger. His clothes were torn, dirt and sweat smeared across his arms, but his expression was something Velka hadn't expected. Amused. He was smiling. "That was fast," he muttered, shaking his head as he looked down at the mauler. "I was about 10 seconds away from taking care of it myself." Velka narrowed her amber eyes. "You were about 10 seconds away from getting torn apart?" Ethan shrugged. "Same thing." Velka fought the urge to roll her eyes. This human had no sense of self-preservation. She had tracked him for days, watching him evade every trap she had set with infuriating precision, and yet, here he was, about to become some monster's dinner, if not for her intervention. His luck had finally run out. And still, he acted like this was just another day. Velka wasn't sure whether to be impressed or annoyed. She sheathed her blade, stepping closer, studying him carefully. "You've been running from me since I landed on this planet," she said, her voice low. "Every trap I set, you avoided. Every ambush, you escaped." Ethan smirked. "I have a habit of not getting caught." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "I caught you now." Ethan lifted an eyebrow. "Did you?" Velka stiffened slightly. He wasn't wrong. In the strictest sense, she hadn't captured him. He wasn't bound, wasn't restrained, wasn't under her control. He had simply been forced to stop running. And that was not the same. She crossed her arms. "You're coming with me." Ethan let out a soft laugh. "Oh? And what exactly am I to you? A bounty? A trophy?" Velka's jaw tightened. A huntress never second-guessed her mission. When she was given a target, she executed. Simple. Efficient. Flawless. So why was she hesitating now? She studied him for a moment, her keen hunter's instincts taking over, analyzing everything about him, the way he stood, the way his muscles remained coiled, ready to move at a moment's notice. Even after everything, he wasn't afraid of her. Most beings, when faced with a Turakian huntress, would have begged for mercy. Ethan just looked curious. "You still haven't told me what you want," he continued. Are you planning to kill me? Velka scoffed. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have wasted time tracking you. Then what? Ethan tilted his head. Are you bringing me in for a bounty? She hesitated, and Ethan noticed. That damn grin returned to his lips, his blue eyes sharp with knowing amusement. You don't even know, do you? He said, his voice laced with mock surprise. Velka clenched her teeth. She hated this, hated that he was right. The truth was, when she had first been given this assignment, the reasoning had been simple: hunt him, capture him, return him to the client. She hadn't asked why. Terrakians were not mercenaries. They were hunters. They didn't ask questions. But now, after seeing him up close, watching how he survived against impossible odds, evading capture for days, something about this felt wrong. Who hired you? Ethan asked suddenly. Velka's gaze flickered. That's none of your concern. Ethan chuckled, stepping closer, unfazed by the tension between them. Oh, I think it is. Considering I'm the one being hunted. Velka didn't answer. Because deep down, she wanted to know, too. Her contact had been vague, too vague. She had received the mission through the usual encrypted channels, the payment substantial, but the details? Barely any. The only thing she had been told was that Ethan Voss was dangerous and that he could not be allowed to escape. But dangerous how? Velka had hunted war criminals. She had taken down syndicate bosses, Republic deserters, and rogue assassins. Ethan wasn't any of those things. He was just a scavenger, a survivor. And now, she wasn't sure who the real threat was. A threat in the dark. The jungle remained silent, but Velka felt something shift in the air. A ripple. A disturbance. And then she heard it. A distant hum. Faint at first, barely noticeable, but growing steadily louder. A sound not natural to the jungle. Velka and Ethan locked eyes. They both recognized it instantly. Starship engines. Velka's heart lurched. Someone else was here. She turned sharply, her enhanced vision scanning the horizon, catching the telltale flicker of blue thrusters descending just beyond the tree line. Not a single ship. 3. That was bad. Very, very bad. Velka felt a cold realization settle into her bones. This wasn't a random event. Whoever had hired her hadn't trusted her to finish the job. Ethan was watching her carefully. Friends of yours? Velka's expression darkened. No. She reached for her weapon, her instinct screaming at her that this was no longer a hunt. This was an execution. And for the first time since this assignment began, Velka XYN wasn't the predator anymore. She was the prey. A common enemy. Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. We need to move. Now. Velka's pride bristled, but she knew he was right. The ships were heavily armed, and whoever was on them wasn't here to negotiate. They were here to finish what she hadn't. She cursed under her breath, turning toward the jungle. Follow me. Ethan let out a small laugh. So now we're working together? Velka shot him a sharp look. Shut up and run. And they ran. Together. Through the dense, tangled jungle, past the towering trees and thick brush, Velka leading with Ethan right beside her. For the first time in her life, Velka wasn't chasing. She was running for her life. And the man she had spent days hunting? He was the only one keeping her alive. Chapter 3. Hunted Together. Velka had never run like this before. Not for survival. She had always been the hunter, the one setting the traps, stalking her prey, ensuring her target had no chance of escape. But now, she was moving through the jungle like prey, her heart pounding in rhythm with the rustling leaves, the distant hum of incoming ships, and the unmistakable clank of armored boots on soil. They were here for her. She had suspected it the moment she saw 3 landing craft instead of 1. The people who had hired her no longer needed her. They had sent others to finish the job. And that meant she had been expendable from the beginning. Beside her, Ethan Voss was keeping up silent, calculating, and entirely too relaxed for a man being actively hunted. His breathing was controlled, his movements precise, and he navigated the terrain with a skill that didn't match the story of a simple scavenger. That unsettled her more than the soldiers chasing them. Because Ethan wasn't just a target. He was something else. The pursuers close in. A voice crackled over her comm unit 1 she didn't recognize. Velka XYN. You are no longer required. She ground her teeth, resisting the urge to respond. A rookie mistake, one she wouldn't make. Whoever these people were, they weren't Terrakians. They weren't part of her people's honor-bound way of hunting. This was something else entirely. They were mercenaries. Hired killers. And she hated mercenaries. Ethan gave her a sidelong glance as they ran. So, I'm guessing that wasn't a friendly message? Velka didn't answer. They dodged under thick, low-hanging vines, their boots barely making a sound on the damp jungle floor. The lights of the ships flickered through the trees behind them, sweeping searchlights trying to lock onto their position. Then, Velka heard it. A mechanized whirring sound. Drones. Her blood went cold. They're deploying Seekers, she growled. Ethan frowned. Seekers? Velka grabbed his wrist and yanked him into a ditch, just as a small, hovering drone buzzed past, its red sensor lights flashing as it scanned the undergrowth. Ethan barely made a sound as he hit the ground beside her, his face inches from hers. Velka barely noticed. She was too focused. The Seeker hovered for a moment, rotating as its sensors scanned the area. If it detected biological heat signatures, it would alert the main squad immediately. Velka had one shot at this. She reached for her hunting knife, fingers tightening around the worn grip, and launched herself from the ditch like a striking serpent. The knife sliced through the drone's central processor with perfect precision. The machine sputtered ****, flashing wildly for half a second **** before it died, crashing lifelessly into the jungle floor. Velka landed in a crouch beside it, her breath controlled. Ethan exhaled. Nice move. Velka shot him a glare. Shut up and move. They ran again, deeper into the twisted jungle, the sounds of their pursuers growing louder. Whoever was after them, they were well equipped. This wasn't just a bounty retrieval. This was a kill mission. A dangerous realization. After another 10 minutes of nonstop running, Velka signaled for Ethan to stop. They had reached a rocky incline, the terrain growing more treacherous as the jungle thinned out. A few scattered plateaus of jagged stone jutted up from the ground like the bones of a forgotten beast, providing temporary cover. Velka pressed her back against a large boulder, scanning the darkness with sharp eyes. Ethan did the same, his own gaze darting toward the flashing searchlights moving methodically through the trees. They weren't going to outrun these mercenaries forever, and Velka knew it. Ethan must have sensed the shift in her mood because he finally broke the silence. We need to figure out who's trying to kill us, he muttered. Velka scoffed. I know exactly who's trying to kill me. I'm just not sure why they want you dead. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his face. Yeah, about that. Velka narrowed her eyes. Start talking. Ethan leaned back against the rock, tilting his head toward the sky. For a long moment, he was silent, and Velka almost thought he wouldn't say anything at all. Then, they think I stole something. Velka frowned. Did you? Ethan hesitated. Not exactly. Velka glared. Not exactly? Ethan sighed. I found something. Something I wasn't supposed to. Velka crossed her arms. I'm going to need more than vague half-truths, scavenger. Ethan looked at her then, and for the first time, Velka saw something serious in his expression. I found a Republic archive. An old, hidden one. Buried under a dead planet in the Outer Rim. Velka's pulse spiked. A Republic archive? Those weren't just databases. They were secrets. Lost knowledge. Forgotten war records. Blacklisted information that entire governments had erased from existence. She stared at him. You're telling me you found something so important that someone sent a Terrakian Huntress after you, and you thought it was a good idea to just keep running? Ethan smirked. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound kinda dumb. Velka let out a low curse, dragging a hand through her dark red braids. This was bad. This was worse than bad. This wasn't just a bounty. This was a cover-up. Whoever had hired her, whoever had sent these mercenaries, was trying to erase Ethan from existence before whatever he found got out. And now, because she had refused to kill him, they were trying to erase her, too. Velka hated politics. She hated being used. And most of all, she hated being played. She turned back to Ethan, her voice sharp. Where's the data? Ethan hesitated. It's stored in my neural link. Velka blinked. You uploaded classified Republic data into your own brain? Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, yeah. I didn't exactly have a safe deposit box nearby. Velka let out a long, frustrated sigh. Unbelievable. the plan to fight back. A rustling sound in the distance caught their attention. The mercenaries were getting closer. Velka tightened her grip on her weapon. All right, listen to me, scavenger. We can't keep running. They'll track us no matter what. Ethan nodded. Agreed. She turned to him, her amber eyes sharp. So we kill them first? Ethan blinked. That's your plan? Just kill them? Velka gave him a predatory grin. I am a huntress, Ethan. And this time they are the prey. Ethan sighed. Well, this should be fun. She looked toward the jungle, already strategizing. We set a trap. We lure them in. I need you to trust me. Ethan smirked. Trust you? You were trying to capture me 3 hours ago. Velka shrugged. And yet, I'm the only one keeping you alive. Ethan chuckled. All right, Huntress. Let's see what you've got. And just like that, the hunted became the hunters. Chapter 4. The Hunt Turns. The jungle was alive with tension. Velka had spent her entire life tracking, hunting, and capturing, but now, for the first time, she was the one setting the bait. The irony wasn't lost on her, and she could tell by the glint in Ethan's eyes that he saw the humor in it too. Except there was nothing funny about the situation they were in. The mercenaries were closing in, methodical and ruthless. Their drones swept the jungle with red-tinted sensor beams, scanning for movement, heat signatures, anything that might give away their location. The hum of approaching ships vibrated through the humid air, their searchlights cutting harsh beams through the thick foliage. Velka knew what that meant. They were done playing games. If she and Ethan didn't act soon, they would be flushed out and executed like animals. And Velka XYN refused to die like prey. The trap is set. This is insane, Ethan muttered as he crouched behind a cluster of thick roots, setting a rudimentary trip mine using scavenged energy cells from his pack. His hands were quick, precise, too skilled for a mere scavenger. Velka had spent years watching the movements of trained killers, and Ethan moved like one of them. She made a mental note of it, but now wasn't the time for questions. We need to funnel them into a kill zone, Velka said, adjusting her energy bow, setting it to high-impact burst mode. If we let them surround us, we're dead. Ethan nodded, securing a makeshift explosive into the crevice of an old, rotting tree trunk. You're the expert. I'm just following your lead. Velka snorted. That's the smartest thing you've said all day. Ethan smirked. Don't get used to it. The plan was simple but brutal. They would bait the mercenaries into an open stretch of jungle, where natural rock formations and thick undergrowth would limit their mobility. There, Velka's deadly accuracy and Ethan's ingenuity with explosives would give them an advantage however small it might be. The real challenge? Surviving the first wave. The battle begins. They didn't have to wait long. The mercenaries moved in like wolves, their armor gleaming black under the artificial lights of their hovering drones. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man in matte gray tactical gear, raised a fist, signaling his squad to fan out. Velka watched from the shadows, gripping her energy bow so tightly that her claws dug into her palm. Then, one of the mercenaries triggered the first tripwire. A blast of concussive energy tore through the underbrush, sending 2 soldiers flying backward with a sudden, brutal shockwave. The jungle erupted into chaos, mercenaries shouting, weapons being drawn, drones pivoting wildly to locate the source of the attack. Velka struck first. She fired a charged bolt straight through the skull of a soldier who had been moving to take cover. The impact sent his body spinning backward, smoke trailing from the charred hole where his helmet had been. Ethan moved like a ghost, darting between the trees, throwing small explosive charges at the enemy's flanks. One detonated just as 2 mercenaries took cover behind a fallen log, blasting them apart in a spray of metal and fire. The enemy forces adjusted quickly, shifting into a tight formation, their leader barking orders. Velka grinned. She loved a challenge. Face to face with the enemy, the mercenary commander, a brute of a man named Colin Arwyx, stepped forward through the smoke. His visor glowed red, scanning the battlefield. Huntress XYN, he called out, his voice distorted through his helmet speaker. You've caused us a great deal of inconvenience. Velka emerged from the darkness, stepping into the moonlit clearing, her bow raised but not drawn. You should have brought more men, she said coldly. Arwyx tilted his head. I was told you were smart, but you made a mistake. Velka narrowed her eyes. Enlighten me. The mercenary commander lifted his wrist, tapping a control panel. A beacon light flared in the sky. Velka's stomach dropped. An orbital strike. Ethan's voice came through her calm, I hate to break up your villain monologue session, but we need to move. Now. Velka cursed and fired at RYX, but he had already activated his personal shield, absorbing the impact as he took a step back. Then, the sky exploded. A desperate escape. The orbital strike slammed into the jungle behind them, sending a shockwave of burning plasma and shattered trees in all directions. The force of the blast sent Velka and Ethan flying, tumbling through the air before hitting the ground hard. Velka coughed, her ears ringing. The jungle was burning, flames licking at the trees as the air turned thick with smoke. Ethan stumbled to his feet, wincing. Okay, I'll admit this isn't the worst situation I've been in, but it's close. Velka wiped blood from her lip, her vision spinning. They were out of options. She could see RYX and his remaining mercenaries regrouping, weapons raised. They had more firepower, more resources, and the advantage of reinforcements from orbit. She and Ethan? They had nothing left. Unless... Velka's eyes darted toward the wreckage of an old Republic gunship half buried near the clearing. Ethan, she said sharply, can you fly? Ethan followed her gaze and grinned. I like where your head's at. They sprinted for the wreckage as the mercenaries opened fire. Velka zigzagged, narrowly dodging a plasma bolt that seared past her shoulder. Ethan slid into the ship's cockpit, frantically ripping out broken wiring as he powered up the control panel. The gunship groaned, ancient and damaged, but the engines rumbled to life. Velka dove inside just as a barrage of gunfire slammed into the hull, barely missing her. Ethan let out a laugh of exhilaration. Hold on to something. The engines roared, and the gunship lurched off the ground, kicking up a storm of fire and debris as it blasted into the sky. Velka leaned against the co-pilot's seat, catching her breath as she watched the burning jungle shrink beneath them. Ethan grinned at her. Well, Huntress, looks like we live to fight another day. Velka exhaled. For now. But she knew one thing for certain. The hunt was far from over. Epilogue. A new hunt begins. They landed hours later, far from the battleground, in an abandoned supply depot buried in the cliffs. Ethan was already rerouting power to long-range comms, trying to figure out just how deep his Republic archive secrets went. Velka watched him in silence, her mind racing. The mercenaries wouldn't stop. Whoever had hired her, whoever wanted Ethan erased, they were part of something much bigger. She had spent her entire life hunting targets for others. But now, she was the one being hunted, and she wasn't going to let that stand. Velka smirked and leaned against the console. All right, scavenger, she said. Let's find out who tried to kill us. Ethan grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. And just like that, the real hunt began.